Hi, this is Lamar, and you're listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. A third space is a term that refers to a safe space for people to come together for respectful dialogue in a spirit of listening, sharing, and learning. In this podcast, we explore what it means to have third space conversations, and we try to model them. If you like what you hear in this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, share it, and of course, like it. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society. Now let's get to third space today.
Hey, Lamar, it's good to see you today.
Hi, Tom. You're looking good and spry today. Are you feeling spry?
Spry?
Yeah.
No.
I thought I'd just throw you a curveball and see how you handled that one.
Thank you. Well, if I were spry enough, I would have knocked it right back to you,
Yeah, that's
but,
right.
Oh,
good to see you, though.
Oh, my God, that's really good. I love that. So, well, hey, it's a good thing we are, I am semi-spry.
Yeah.
Today, because we've got a really interesting show today.
It is. It's one we've been looking at for quite a while.
Yeah, and actually, you've been kind of doing this hunt about all things AI and social media recently, and you sent me a couple things that are really interesting.
Yeah, and part of it is it relates to what I do in the photography world, and that's, I think there's a lot for us to talk about in the future, but been looking at some documentaries and been taking a look at some YouTubes, people who are talking about artificial intelligence and talking about social media and how those two things are starting to maybe interact and how that impacts us and kind of the decisions that we make and kind of what we see and hear and are kind of fed. So I think it's one of these things where we need to open our eyes a little bit more and learn more about what's going on.
Yeah, and I know we're going to loop back on some of this in the near future, but I did watch that TED Talk you sent me today.
Right, that was interesting.
Oh, that was really interesting. Guy named Dino Ambrosi, I believe, and I think it's entitled "The Battle for Your Time."
Right.
In social media, and actually we put a link to that in the show notes for this episode and the next episode, because we're gonna do a two-parter on our topic today, but really encourage folks to take a look at it. It raises some disturbing questions about how we actually spend our time and how much time is really available to us, and do we really want to spend it swiping?
Well, true. And I think, I don't know if it's as disturbing as it is just a bit of reality that, our lives are finite, right? In the sense of, our time here has got so many hours and weeks and months and years. What are we going to do with those times? And when you begin to put it out on data tables and then challenge kind of what you're actually doing with that time, and it is maybe a bit sobering, but also I think gives you to me a sense of I can take control of this, and that's part of what the message is we want to bring today.
Yeah. Well, all of that to say that we're not really going to dig really deep into all of that today, but we are going to dig deep into something that you brought to us a while back, a documentary called The Social Dilemma. And we'll say more about that when we get started here, but we just want to mention that we brought in our friend Ed Schrager from London in the UK. Ed's very much a guy that understands AI and social media in a way that we don't, and we kind of look to him as kind of our go-to guy in helping us figure some of these things out. So we invited Ed to join us on this podcast to help us think about and take a look at this docudrama, the Social Dilemma. Anything you want to say about that by way of introduction, Lamar, or?
Well, I think I'm going to do a summary here in just a bit with Ed. And I will say, though, I did follow your lead. I did order the fruit basket It may not have arrived yet. I got to check the tracking number.
Oh, yeah. And so, and it's kind of a funny time of year because we actually, even though this episode is going to air right after the first of the year, in the beginning of our third season, how about that? We actually recorded this near the end of the year, and there's a lot of things going through the mail on UPS right now. So hopefully.
All right.
So,
well, let's introduce our friend.
All right, so we've opened the door to the green room, and Ed Traeger is here with us. Hey, Ed, did you get that? Did you get that basket that Lamar sent you, or Lamar, did you even send the basket?
I did, but I bet I have a tracking number, and I see that it's somewhere over the North Atlantic right now. But it should be coming in fairly soon, maybe this evening. So be looking for that, Ed.
Yeah, no, well, but listen out. Is it going to be landing on the roof? Like, is it coming on a sleigh or something like that? Like an early Christmas present? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, some cookies by the fireplace was a good idea.
Beautiful.
See,
I'll put them out before I go to bed.
The perennial fruit basket that you get. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to have you.
You escaped that fruit basket, Ed. So, yeah, it's great to see you, Ed. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So we're going to have a conversation today on a Netflix video called The Social Dilemma. And of course, before we got to this point, we had an assignment for the three of us to complete. It was a real tough assignment. It was simply that Lamar and Ed and I were to watch the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, and then be prepared to discuss it in this podcast. So, Lamar, let's begin with you. And why don't you give us a quick synopsis of The Social Dilemma? What was the movie about? And then Ed and I will chime in with things that maybe we think we saw in it that it was about too. So
and I've watched it 3 or 4 times now. Actually, last night I watched it again with my wife.
Oh my gosh!
That's called
and realize
that's being the very
response.
keen one in the. That's the keen one in the class.
That's absolutely. No, The Social Dilemma is kind of a docudrama that came out in 2020 and can be seen on Netflix right now. The subject is basically about how social media and technology manipulates us as users and creates kind of maybe addictive features in us. Tristan Harris is kind of who is a Google designer, kind of narrates and is interviewed throughout the whole movie. It's kind of the center pin for the movie. He's a current co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology, which I don't know much about, but I'm interested in learning a little bit about. He's also joined by other engineers and designers, marketing specialists from a lot of different other social media companies like Facebook, Apple, Twitter, TikTok, and you name it. They seem to be represented in the movie. So the movie explores and suggests that users like you and me and others who are watching are manipulated to spend more screen time on social media, to be exposed to what the advertisers are wanting us to be exposed to. Things like products, maybe propaganda, conspiracy theories. And they even suggest that maybe extreme radicalization might play into kind of how social media is being used. But the idea is to kind of change our behavior, and by changing our watching behavior, to be able to impact kind of either what we are purchasing or how we are connecting with other people. So the primary theory is that social media and technology, the algorithms use techniques that create addiction and behavior shaping to keep us tuned in and engaged, right? So it does suggest that not only is this a danger maybe to democracy, but also to the mental health of the users, and especially to the vulnerable ones, like like children, and I was even thinking maybe those who are older and not as technical savage. So the writers are suggesting in this movie that social media and technology is responsible for the propagation of misinformation, disinformation, political polarization. They talk about that quite a bit. Also, maybe the dissemination of our private data, and definitely targeting advertising. So, in kind of a synopsis, that's kind of what I kind of saw, big picture. They do at the end come up with some recommendations as well. Yeah. How does that sound to you guys?
Well, Lamar, thanks for that. I wanted to defer to Ed at this point, and I just want to remind folks that Ed is a guy that is our go-to for a lot of information on AI and digital technology. He's been a great mentor to us, and we really wanted to pull him in on this conversation. So, Ed, was there anything in that synopsis there that you would like to add to?
So I think it was a good synopsis, and I think just the thing for me to add was that I really liked the way that they sort of portrayed the algorithms, particularly, as people within a computer, in that sort of control mothership, as they were pulling the levers and doing the advert auctions and stuff like that. I thought for me that really sort of brought it to life. The sort of humanizing the algorithm just really made it like, oh yeah, because I kind of know that stuff that's going on, how they do the adverts but to see it humanized, because that there are humans who program those algorithms to do things that humans couldn't possibly do, so to humanize it sort of flipped it over and just made it really real. That this, for me, it's not the machines, it's the humans. The machines are all being used by humans. So it's, at the end of the day, it's humans who are responsible for all this stuff, not the machines. So I thought that was quite a good way to animate it that way. Worked for me.
I thought that was really interesting, and it threw me off a little bit. I couldn't quite figure out what they were doing, who they were, and what they were. But then I finally put those pieces together. I'll tell you what leapt out at me right away in the show. It was in the early part, and somebody, I don't know if it was Tristan Harris or somebody else, said, "What is the problem? It doesn't have a name." And I thought, well, that's going to be an interesting show. It's trying to address a problem that they have a really hard time even naming. Now, I think it became clear as the show went on, but it was that actually really caught my interest. I thought, yeah, and just fascinating to see where this goes.
Just another thing to drop in was, I didn't, because I just went onto Netflix and watched it, and I didn't really look at the information about it beforehand, and then when I watched that video that you sent round of Dr. Todd, I think it was, talking about it, that was the first time that I clocked that it had been made in 2020. So and when I was watching it, I thought it was a new thing. So I don't think I'd heard of it before. I hadn't come across it, hadn't seen it. So I was assuming this was a new release. And then when I found out it was actually published in 2020, so it didn't come across like it was 2020 when they were filming it. It could have been made this year. So there was something there
that's a really good point.
It didn't feel like.
So from your perspective, it still is a very relevant documentary.
It seemed like it to me. It seemed like it had just been released as I was watching it, and then when I realised, it was actually released in 2020. Right. I wasn't sort of shocked and thinking, oh wow, yeah, of course it was 4 years old. So there may be something in there that resonates.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of switch up the conversation a little bit here and go to the question: So you saw the film. Some of us saw it multiple times. What did we think about the film? And think about this as a little bit like one of those movie review shows, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumb sideways, and why? Why do we consider it that way? So anyway, Ed, how would you rate the show?
In the thumbs up world, I need to put them in. I think I'd give it a double thumbs up, which is good. That's a good thing. I think probably for people who are, it's a bit of a. I'm probably an easy audience for it, I would say. So I agree with a lot of what it was talking about. The sort of the dangers of this and the dangers of that, and the addictive nature of social media, all that sort of stuff. I kind of agree with what they're talking about. So I'm a bit of a. I mean, it was a bit of an echo chamber thing for me, I think. So, I would be like, yeah, definitely agree with that. I think there'd be a lot of people who would be very sort of nonplussed by what it was talking about. But I generally agree with the points they're making, and I think as I was watching it and thinking about it and researching it before and afterwards, I've kind of done a lot of things in my own ways of working and my own ways of living to avoid a lot of that stuff. So basically, not using social media very much, being very careful about how I, use who I share my data with and all that sort of stuff. I've very much sort of locked down a lot of that stuff to avoid all those things that it was talking about. So I think I've done a lot of things that you'd almost recommend if you were watching that film. Does that make sense? So yes, yeah, it sort of gave me justification for, yes, it's probably a good idea that you're not on those sort of platforms much anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm glad about that. That it was kind of, yes, that it was a good idea to move away from doing that sort of stuff, and to, when I'm talking to my kids about social media and how they use all of that, really hammering home the points to them often about being careful with it has been justified.
Well, Lamar, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, I've watched it multiple times now. The first, I'm going to give it a thumbs up. So, I give it a thumbs up. And I give it a thumbs up primarily because it's starting a conversation, or it's part of a conversation we really need to have, that I think is a very important conversation. Now, my own personality is that as I tend to watch things or review things more, I go down in the weeds a little further, right? And so I get a little critical, which is, just, it's okay. But generally, it's a thumbs up. I like the idea of using subject matter experts in the film. People who, they knew what they were talking about. They were designers. They were architect kind of folks who, they put things together, put them in place, and didn't expect necessarily the outcomes that they were not only seeing but also experiencing personally by using the platforms. I thought that was very interesting. I think that the vignettes, the dramatic vignettes, I thought were helpful. I would have probably. I kind of tuned out after a little while on some of the vignettes, but the idea, though, I thought was a really good idea, is to put it into practice, particularly the very first one with a family around the table. I mean, who of us with family have not experienced it these days, where everyone's head is in the phone while we're trying to eat and talk about our day, right? I thought that was particularly of all the vignettes, that was the most powerful one for me. I liked I like how it pointed out the things we could do differently. Excuse me. I like that we could, we had control over also how we interact with social media. And I think, Ed, that's what you really bring to the table personally, is kind of what you have done to minimize your exposure. I didn't get the sense that those who are doing the who are being interviewed were coming at it from a sense of sour grapes. I didn't get that sense at all. What I did get, though, was a sense of heightened concern based on what I think the three of us have experienced in interacting with social media. Last night, as I was reviewing the documentary, I had my iPad on because I was taking notes as I was going along. And danged if I wasn't getting notifications as I was trying to type and listening to I'm thinking, okay, Lamar, here's what you're dealing with is exactly what you're watching. And so I went in and turned notifications off because they were useless. Like, why do I care what the temperature is in the Ozarks here in Missouri? But I got a notification of what the temperature was. I was like, well, I don't need that kind of interruption. So I found even while interacting with it that it just really struck home for me. I think some things that came out on the age of the film is the lag time between when these individuals being interviewed were part of the build process and what we're looking at now. I'm really curious to see what might have changed in the meantime, if anything, as these things are being pointed out. So, but overall, I like the film, and it really is a stimulating film, but I think it ought to be the beginning of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to join you in giving it a thumbs up. So far we've got 4 thumbs up, 2 from Ed, 1 from Lamar, 1 from me, and I would say that the reason I give it a thumbs up is because it drops some pieces in there that I found really made me think. I mean, so much so that when I heard them, I would stop the video and I would replay it until I got the exact quote written down. And there were 3 in particular, and I'm just going to wrap through those very quickly. I don't know exactly who said these. I think only one of them maybe have come from Tristan Harris. But the first was, if something is genuinely a tool, it is just sitting there waiting patiently. If it is not a tool, it's demanding things from you. And of course, what hit me about that is we always heard people say, hey, it's only a tool. It's only a tool. It can't do anything. Well, I don't know. And then the second quote that really got me was, there are only 2 industries that call their customers users: illegal drugs and software. I go, ooh, ouch. That really kind of stung when I read that or heard that. And then this one was from Tristan Harris. He said, this is overpowering human nature. And this is a checkmate on humanity. And that had one of those almost like War of the Worlds kinds of rings to it for me. It's like, oh my gosh, a checkmate on humanity. Does it mean that we have lost the battle? Have we lost total control? And actually, earlier on in that segment, that I think is the point he was trying to make, is that we've lost control of the digital world, and AI may be the latest, indication of that. Lamar, when we were preparing for this and talking, I think it was yesterday or the day before that, we were talking about we should both look up boats in Kansas Have you gotten any ads for boats in Kansas?
I have not. I checked last night. I haven't checked this morning, but I haven't received any ads. How about you?
I haven't either, which I'm really glad for. But Ed, what we did is we did this experiment knowing we were having this conversation with you.
Yeah.
That what if we just did a Google search on boats for Kansas lakes or something like that, right? And we put in the exact same phrase. And when we did a search, we found that many of the same sites came up for both of us, although we were miles apart. And then we wanted to pay attention to see if it was reading our search, and if we would just mysteriously begin to get all these ads popping up for to buy boats in Kansas. So, fortunately, it doesn't appear that neither of us did a whole lot. Did you get any pop-ups on your end, Ed, for boats in Kansas? Just out of curiosity.
No, I didn't know where you were going with the boats in Kansas thing. I was like, oh my God, what's boats in Kansas? But possibly, now we've. I'm still thinking that Lamar lives in the Ozarks, and I watched a lot of the Ozarks programs. I'm like, that's cool. We need to. I'd love to talk more about that another time. But yeah, I didn't. That whole thing about searching for something and then you get popped by an advert. I mean, it's mad, but I think that has been in some sort of shape or form. That kind of thing's been happening for years, before the internet and all of that. Where if you used to sign up to some sort of mailing list back in years ago, before mailing lists were online, if you'd some sort of magazine, you'd send off something and then you'd get sent something from somebody, and there, all of that. So that's, in some shape or form, it's been happening for hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years. People have been promoting their stuff. I think one of the things that came through it was all of that has just been accelerated and amplified by social media. So it's the things that humans want to do are now easier, quicker, faster.
Yeah, I think too, from the video, it talked about repetition. As if I would be looking for boats in Kansas multiple times, multiple ways, over a period of time, it's likely that phenomenon would show itself as kind of a targeted marketing approach. And in fact, I've been looking at campers. My wife and I do a lot of camping, and I have a camper, and I'm looking at doing an upgrade. And I've been looking at campers. Well, interesting enough, every time I turn on Facebook, I get a whole list of campers now to look at. But wait, it makes sense because, I've been entering that information into the system multiple times. And so it's going to take that and target market me, which is, like you said, it's been going on for a lot of years in different forms.
One sort of different,
go ahead,
one different view just to throw in is, so I've got a friend who's developed and developing an app which is for use on a global scale, which is basically taking all this thing about being powered by advertising, and it's then so that people who live in places, not the US, not the UK, but places like the Philippines or India, they can use this app and watch videos and make videos and share them with each other and basically get paid for watching ads. So by watching the ads, they're actually getting money which they can then use to fund the fees to do a transfer, like a remittance to their family in a different country. So it's kind of you spinning this whole thing on its head so that it's actually beneficial for the user rather than beneficial for the big company. So in the case of YouTube and Facebook and those sort of ones which they were talking about, the adverts are making the big companies all of the money. Whereas if you can sort of spin that round so that it's more about the users getting almost like a fair sort of portion of the money that is being generated by the adverts. I just think that's a really interesting sort of spin on this whole thing of if you're on YouTube, for example, to be able to make money out of your YouTube channel, you have to have something like 10,000 subscribers, and you have to have, I don't know what the numbers are, 1,000 hours of content and all this sort of stuff to be able to reach the level where you can actually start earning some money. Whereas if you had a system that is more fair to the users, it could be used for good. So it's just sort of, there are different ways this could be done, which could possibly be better.
Well, thanks for helping me understand why we're not making any money on our YouTube channel.
On our YouTube channel.
Yeah, you need a lot of subscribers.
And
I think you zeroed in. I think you zeroed in on that part of the documentary that was. I think we knew this, and I think we know this, that why is social media free in most cases? It's because they're asking us to participate in their in their enterprise, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be one who says, "Oh, this is because they're trying to help me have a better life experience." Maybe there are some like that, but basically, it's about money.
Absolutely,
and it's
100%.
about
It's the way I see it is it's eyeballs. They want your eyeballs on there for as long as possible, and all the features that they bring in, like for the more kids, on TikTok and Snapchat and all that sort of thing. It's all the filters and the editing you can do on your videos, and you can take a video of yourself dancing and turning it into a Cybertron or whatever. That's all. More people are just looking at TikTok for longer and longer and longer, so they can say to the advertisers, "Well, we've got 1 billion eyeballs on your stuff." That's all that is. But it's sold as it's fun and a great way to connect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ed, you said something a little while ago about this has been going on in other forms for a long time, and I was just reflecting on when we decided to move, which we did this year. We put in a change of address with the post office, and all of a sudden, we are getting flyers and letters and advertisers from everything from movers to alternative electricity companies to all kinds of things trying to make our move easier, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to say that no matter what they could have done, it wouldn't have been easy. But it did make me think about that experience that, I hadn't really thought of it in that context, that by simply changing our address, saying, "Hey, we're gonna be in a different location in so many days," it never occurred to me that is very similar to the whole phenomenon that we have with social media, and the attempt to sell us something.
And while we're on thinking about mediums, with podcasts, so we're on a podcast now, and I don't know how many other podcasts you listen to. And I imagine it's the same in the US as the sort of way we do it here. I've got an iPhone, so I do it on iPhone podcasts, whatever it's called, that purple button. And if you're not if you're not paying for the podcast, you get adverts.
Yeah.
So you listen to
you
listen to the podcast. This is sponsored by blah 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 blah, and it's either the host who talks about the product or service or whatever it is, or it's just an advert that's beamed into the podcasts. Let's take a break, and then there's an advert, and then they come back after the break, and there's another advert.
Yeah.
So it's all over everywhere, and I don't know where they're going to go with that. But imagine if the adverts tune in to what podcasts you've been listening to or something. If your podcast, you listen to this, you listen to that, you listen to this. Ooh, you're definitely going to like this.
Yeah, it makes me curious what kind of ads they're running with our podcast. I mean,
They'll
that's,
people. I've did quite a lot of research into it to see how it works, and basically you go on to the podcast platform and you can put in, I want to spend $250 over the course of a week, and then it will just spray your advert out into random podcasts. You can sort of you sort of select your themes of what you want, business, finance, whatever. You can sort of do that, but you won't really know where it's going if you're spending that sort of money. The way you can, if you want to know where your ad's going, then you can spend thousands of dollars a week sponsoring a show of a well-known podcast where you then get the host to actually say your stuff. But the amount that costs like $30,000 a week to do that, and on a top podcast, to get the host saying the name of your product and doing Googler really blah blah blah, costs an absolute fortune.
Well, we would be happy to say people's names for a fraction of that.
Yeah.
We don't need much.
Tom Klaus here. We decided to break our conversation with Ed Schrager into two parts. In this first part, we did our best movie critic impressions to rate the documentary or docudrama, The Social Dilemma. Ed gave the film 2 thumbs up, and Lamar and I each gave it 1 thumbs up. In part 2 of the conversation, we'll go a bit deeper into the film, its meaning and value. See you then. Tom here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to get notices about new episodes, and be sure to like and share the podcast as well. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar Roth and Tom Klaus, and we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talked about today, so you can check them out yourself. Until next time, keep moving forward toward third space.